Hey everyone, welcome to today's video. Today we are going to talk about how to make network calls in Android without using Retrofit, right? So Retrofit is one of the most popular libraries that almost every single project uses to make network calls to get data from the server into the app, right? But today we'll try to check out how to do all of that without using the Retrofit library, and we'll see how the developers at Google, when they were making Android, how they intended for us as Android developers to make network calls using the HTTP URL connection APIs that they provided in the Android SDK itself, right? Okay, so I have a basic project setup over here. I just have added two new dependencies on it. One is the coroutines one, and the other one is the JSON, which we'll be requiring later on to convert the API response into our models, right? So other than that, I have not added any other code, right? So if I had to run this, then in that case it would lead to an app like this, where it would be just one single text view with hello world displayed on top of it. Now if we go here, so this is the API that we'll be using. So this is a hosted open API, right? This URL, right? So what we'll be doing is we'll be calling this endpoint, which would give us a list of users, and the response would look something like this, wherein we would have some parameters and then we would have the data would be an array, right? So the array would contain like a few of these user entities, right? So that would be the basic structure of this API call that would be making. And so going back here, what I'll do is first I'll create a method over here, right? So I'll call it make get API request, right? So I'll create this method, and inside this, what we have to first do is we'll have to first create an instance of the HTTP URL connection, right? So we'll do var HTTP URL connection, HTTP URL connection. First, it will be initialized as null, right? Okay, so now we'll go ahead and create our URL, and then we'll try to open a connection using the URL, right? So what we will do is val URL is equal to URL, and then in this, the parameter it would take is a string, right? So the string is basically the host. So we'll go back over here and we'll copy the URL over here. We'll come back, and here inside this parameter we'll paste the URL, right? So we have pasted the entire URL containing the base URL and also the endpoint, right? So now what we will do is we have our URL. We'll try to create the URL connection, right? So what we'll do is HTTP URL connection is equal to URL dot open connection, and then we'll typecast it to HTTP URL connection, right? So now we have the base URL set. We are trying to open a connection using the HTTP URL connection. So now what we will do is we'll check whether this connection is successful or not, right? So in order to check whether this connection is successful, we need to get hold of the response code. So what we will do is we'll write something like val code is equal to HTTP URL connection dot code. Okay, dot response code, right? So here we'll get hold of the response code. What we will do is we'll check whether the code is one of a successful or whether it is something else, right? So if it is successful, it should be of 200 value, right? The code value should be 200. So in that case, we'll check if code not equal to 200, right? So then it means there was some error. Then in that case, we'll throw an error, right? Throw IO exception, right? And there the message that we need to pass in is the response, or maybe the error, right? The error from the server is $code, right? You can pass in the code over here. After that, if it does not go inside this if, and if it does not throw, then in that case it was a successful API call on our end, right? We got the status code as 200. So what we will do is we'll go forward and read all of the data out of this connection that we made, right? So let's create a buffered reader over here. So we'll do val buffered reader is equal to buffered reader, as the parameter of the buffered reader, it would take in input stream reader, right? So because we need to read the input stream, so here in place of the in place of the input stream, we will pass in the HttpURL connection dot input stream, right? So this we pass this input stream from the HttpURL connection into the input stream reader and inside the buffer reader. So we have a buffer reader created over here. So what we will do is now we will loop through the reader and try to read all of the lines out of it, right? That once we read all of the lines, we need to keep on appending every single line that we read into a string object, right? So what we will do is we'll create a val JSON string holder, right? Is equal to, first we'll initialize it as an empty string, then after that we'll run a loop which will be while true. Then in that case go inside this and check if okay, first we need to initialize val read line is equal to buffered reader dot read line, right? So it will read the line from the buffer reader and store it into this variable called read lines. And then what we would do is we'll check if read line is equal to null. Then in that case our stream has ended and there is nothing more to read, right? So in that case we'll break out of here. Else what we will do is we'll append whatever we read into the JSON string holder, right? So JSON string holder plus equal to we'll write read line, right? So this is a val, so I need to set it as val. So a few improvements we can do over here. The first one is the obvious, which the IDE is showing over here. We can change it into an Elvis operator, right? So we've changed it into an Elvis operator. The other one is this, right? Because the string is final and it cannot be modified. So I think we'll go ahead and make use of a string builder, right? So here what we will do is JSON dot append, and here we will pass in read line, right? So here equals to string builder. Okay, so we initialize this JSON string holder as a string builder, and then we are just doing a string builder dot append, right? So in that case we'll just change this to a val. Okay, fine. We have all of our lines that we wanted to read out of the HttpURL connection into this JSON string holder, right? So we have it as a format, so we have it in the format of a string, right? So in that case what we will do is we'll go ahead and convert it into our JSON structure, right? So which is our entity structure. For that we'll create a new model over here, right? So we'll call this user profile response, right? So this will be a data class, right? So in that case I need to add in the constructor, right? So here what will the constructor contain? The constructor will contain something known as page, right? So here the first one will be val page of type string, and then the second argument would be a per page item, I think. Yes, a per page. So instead of providing this per underscore page, we'll just serialize it, right, into a proper name. So we'll provide serialized name. Here the argument name would be per page, and for that the variable name would be per page, right? So just remove the extra space over here, and after that we have total, right? So in that case we'll just copy this and then we'll paste it over here, and it should be total, right? So we'll write this as total. We write here total pages, right? So total page is 12, and current page. So the next item would be val current page, and that would be a string type, and it's just that the serialized name for it would be total pages, right? And then the data which we want, right? So the data will be a list of user entities. So it will be like val data, which will be a list of user and entities, right? So this we need to create the user entity class we'll create it over here itself, data class user entity. So inside user entity there will be ID, email, first name, last name, avatar, right? So val ID string comma val first name string, and here we need to pass in the serialized name because it was first underscore name, right? Similarly it will be val last name string, and here also the parameter was last underscore name, right? So serialize last underscore name, and then we have the profile, we have the avatar, right? Avatar and email. So val email string email, right? And the last parameter would be val avatar, right? So avatar link string, and here we would provide the serialized name as avatar, right? So our class is almost few other parameters over here which are like URL and text. I don't think we require this at this moment, so we'll just skip it for now, right? So we have the list of user entities and our user profile response object is complete. So what we'll do is we'll go back to our main activity, and then we'll try to parse this string holder that we had into our object, right? So what we'll do is over here we'll write val user profile response is equal to, we'll create a new instance of the JSON dot from JSON, right? Because we have the JSON over here, so we'll pass in the JSON string holder dot to string, right? So we'll convert the string builder into a string, and then we'll just need to provide the class of the object we need to convert the string into, right? So that will be the user profile response entity class.java, right? So this will basically convert our JSON string into our object, right? And then what we need to do is we need to just set this text view that we have over here, which displays hello world. Instead of that, it will be displaying the first name and the last name, right? So in that case, we will go over here and then we will do find view by ID. It will be a text view, right? So r.id dot name dot apply, and here we'll rate text is equal to, so we'll just call the set text method of this text view, right? So here we'll do the text should be user profile response dot data, right? So data dot maybe we'll just take the first user, right? Or we'll take the second user. So in that case the second user should be this Lindsay Ferguson, right? So this should be displayed as the first name and the last name. So dot let, right? So we'll go inside this and we will return it dot first name plus space, right? Or we'll convert it into a string properly because we can do it in Kotlin. So here we'll pass in it dot first name, and then we'll give in a space it dot last name, right? So this will be set as the text of this. The only thing we're missing out over here is that we need to be making all of this API call inside a different thread, right? So we cannot do it inside the main thread. So let's go ahead and launch a coroutine scope over here. So we'll pass in the dispatcher as dispatcher.io, right? So it will move on to the IO thread, one of the IO threads, and then it will do launch, right? So now what we can do is basically call this entire code inside the launch scope, right? Inside the launch scope. So now since we've moved into the background thread, another thing that we cannot do is update the UI from the background thread, right? So here let's quickly jump to the main thread with context, and here we will pass in dispatchers.main, right? So here we'll call .launch, and then we'll copy this bit of the code inside this. So we are parsing everything in the background thread, but we'll just, when we come over here, we'll just change into the main thread, and here we'll be just setting the text into it, right? So let's go ahead And okay, one thing before that is we are doing a throw over here, but we are not handling that explicitly anywhere, right? So in that case, let's go ahead and add a try catch block, right? So here what will happen is this entire thing should be called inside the try block, right? Yeah, so here we'll just add in the catch block. We'll try to catch hold of an IO exception, so that will be an IO exception, right? So here we'll just print, in case it's an IO exception, we'll just log it out, log.e, right? This is our Java class name, that will be the tag, and in the message you'll just pass in the IO exception dot message, right? So this message dot right, so we'll pass in the message as a string format, and we'll just log it out in case it comes into an error. Else it should go ahead and properly set this. The only thing that we have to do is we have to call the disconnect method on top of it, right? So what we will do is we'll add in a finally block, and then here we'll call the URL connection, HttpUrlConnection dot disconnect, right? So this will basically close the URL connection. So let's go ahead and run this. So as you see, the network call happened, and then in that case the Lindsay of JSON is displayed over here, right? So if I go ahead and get hold of another user, say the 0th user, so in our case the 0th user would be Michael Lawson, right? So we'll just go ahead and run this, and let's see what happens. Yeah, see, Michael Lawson is called, right? So just to recap, what we are doing is we are basically launching a new coroutine which will change from our main thread into one of the background IO threads. Then we are creating an instance of the HttpUrlConnection. So this is provided by the Android SDK itself in order to help us to make API calls. After that, internally we are just specifying the URL that we need to call. It will consist of the base URL and also the API endpoint that we had. And then we are trying to open the connection with the URL and typecast it into a HttpUrlConnection, right? Once the connection is open, we are trying to check the code which we got while trying to open the connection. If it was not a 200, then in that case we ran into some sort of an error, because 200 is the only success code in case of a REST API, right? So the all other codes like 404 and all these things define some other type of error, right? So here we'll just throw an IO exception over here, and we'll pass in the code. So then in that case, basically use the buffered reader. So we'll pass in the HttpUrlConnection input stream reader into the buffered reader, and then we'll try to read everything out of the buffered reader into a string, into a JSON string, right? So for that JSON string, we created a string builder, right? So there we'll loop through all of the lines of that buffered reader until it is null, and once it's null, we'll break out of this loop. But every time we loop through it, we'll just add every single line into this JSON string holder, right? So that will basically help us to build our JSON string. And once we have the JSON string, to convert that JSON string holder into our desired model, we can use any serializer. Here I have used JSON, you can use Moshi and anything else that you want, right? So here we'll be passing in the JSON string and the object that we want our JSON string to be converted into, right? So here I had defined all of the fields that I wanted. Now this will convert and give me object of this type, right? User profile response type. So now I'll switch into the main thread because I need to update the UI. UI cannot be updated from the background thread, right? So here I'll get hold of the text view, and there I'll call the setText method. So in that setText method, I'll be basically getting hold of the user from the response that we got, and there I'll pass the first name appended with the last name, and that will set it into the app, something like this, right? So after that, our try block will be ending and only our catch block will remain, right? So the catch block will log any exceptions which were thrown So it will log the message which we passed over here, and then maybe we can handle it appropriately by showing a toast or some kind of an error dialog or something in case of a real app, right? Other than that, in the finally block, which will always execute either try or catch is called, right? So there we'll just close the connection by calling HttpUrlConnection.disconnect. So that is in general how it would work. So this is a very simple tutorial of how you can make a get API call using the URL connection. Similarly, we can do a post API, a put API, like those. We can call any type of API using the HTTP URL connection, right? Even we can download images, everything we can do using the HTTP URL connection. It's just that Retrofit provides a few improvements on top of this. We can add interceptors, we can add converter factories, and then we can add, so if we add converter factories, then we can harness the power of using reactive streams like that, right? So that provides a lot of benefits and advantages on top of this default URL connection, HTTP URL connection, which is present in the Android SDK. So that is why everybody just prefers to use Retrofit. And I also suggest that you should be using Retrofit. But just for our knowledge sake, I think we should be aware of how we are supposed to make an API call if we are not allowed to use a library in any scenario, right? So I hope this video was able to help you a little, and I hope I was able to share something with you. And if you do like this, then please like the video and please subscribe for more content. Thank you.